Dr. Yan mentioned about how all the religions are labeled basically cults within the CCP in China. And everyone who practices those specific religions has to do some sort of registration and control. What I find interesting here is, here in the United States, is how the radical left progressives continually to prosecute and persecute Christians, as you've seen from like at the Dodgers ballgame stadium, this transgenders mocking the crucifix and Christians. And now you see the LGBT pride and the transgenderism coming out. You now see the Muslim community come out with the Christian community to oppose this stuff here. And it puts the Democrats and radical left progressives into a quandary, because they used to then condemn, and they still condemn, all Christians, all Catholics. But now they're finding a quandary here, because they can't condemn the Muslims at the same time then use them as a tool. So this is interesting, because it's much like, as you're saying, within China, they allow certain people to practice religion and do certain things to get their point across, to show that the Chinese Communist Party is an open and free society. But just like here in the US, there's a large amount of hypocrisy in all of that, okay? So it's very interesting to see this, because you hear nothing from the Biden administration about the persecution of these different religions. And you see organizations like the National Basketball Association continue to work with the genocidal regime in China, this committing genocide against the Uyghurs and others. So let's go on to the second question here. And this is an interesting one here, because I really want to get your perspective for our audience here, because we hear a lot in the United States about the Falun Gong and the practice of Falun Gong. Why is this such a controversial topic to some? So I just, want to get your perspective. Is some people have mentioned to me that this can be a very controversial topic. So why is that from a Chinese perspective? Thank you.
So yeah, this is very controversial and very sensitive. From my perspective, why? It's because first, this is a very huge group of people that Chinese Communist Party try to suppress. And there are a lot of Falun Gong members are persecuted. This is definitely should be condemned, and the CCP should be held accountable for these crimes. And however, when we talk about these people, they have suffered a lot. We also should think about in this whole group, there are some people try to use this Falun Gong to do something as what CCP has done. Because in this group, we are talking about, it is now called as religion, and previously, actually back to 1990s, at that time when Falun Gong started, it is just a group to practice the breathing exercise, Qigong. And at that time, it was very popular in China, and CCP, those senior high-level CCP members also enjoy that. That's why a lot of Qigong developed at that time. It was not religion from the beginning. And then later, when it developed, Falun Gong gradually become religious combined with the Qigong. And this triggered the CCP. At that time, it's the chairman Jiang Zemin, their administration's alarm, because once you have this kind of religious group in China, that means you have your own leader. And that means this create a potential threat to the government. So that's why, like the religious group in Tibet, in Xinjiang, China started to use the national power to suppress and to persecute people. However, after that, a lot of people in China were persecuted just because they attended this group. And it doesn't mean China only target Falun Gong people. It's because Falun Gong people has a group organized, so their voice can be heard by outside. But majority of Chinese people, their voice cannot be delivered. So that's why people will say, oh, Falun Gong people are the target. Yes, they are. But at the same time, the other Chinese people are all the targets, as long as you show potential anti-CCP or pursue the freedom. And when Falun Gong moved to US, based in US and other countries, the thing is, as we have seen, United Front work is the leader for all the religion, right? If
Yes.
they so as we have talked before, unrestricted tactic is to make the enemies be your friends working for you. This is unrestricted. It also applied to the members in Falun Gong group. As long as there is an organization, CCP knows how to infiltrate, how to establish their own system inside, and then how to influence people around. They can at least neutralize many people. As long as they neutralize, and then they can have more channels to influence Americans.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why when we talk about it's controversial, there are good people inside, and there are also people have different motives stay in this group, and they can be at high level or basic level. And another thing very important is that Falun Gong has very strong Chinese culture background. I mean, in Chinese culture, because we never had a real idea of what freedom is. I mean, it's something you never seen. You don't know what it is. You don't know how to maintain, how to defend it. So that's why it's easy that when people establish a group like this so big, they have their reputation, they will get more power or something. Gradually, easy for the, especially the high level people, get too close to the tyranny, that kind of organization, because you always feel finally you will go to this side, because this is the only mode you have learned in your life from your culture.
Oh, so that's very interesting. So, go ahead.
Yeah, how to prevent this happen? This is a very big issue, because once CCP get collapsed, I believe it will be in the future, but how to prevent different kind of groups using religion as a title to occupy China, because China will stay in a very big state for vacuum of the faith. People need faith. People need something to support them in spiritually.
Yes.
At that time, there were definitely some people try to use it to establish zero crossing. Even CCP and Xi Jinping try to make zero crossing now. So that will be a big threat, potential threat. We need to think about it now.
Oh, so very interesting. So, being an Intel analyst and such like that, I find a number of things that are interesting from your perspective here. So as my theory of the information equilibrium discusses, in a basic form, it's the control of information that decides whether you move towards democracy or toward dictatorship. And so with Falun Gong, one can see the various threats here was when you have a group of people, not only is it organized, but you can share information. So culturally, other aspects. And in an article in the Epoch Times here back a few months ago, Lily Zhao noted that Falun Gong is, as you said, initial study as a meditation practice of slow-moving exercises, but the doctrine with truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. So those are interesting aspects, because it speaks to more of the individual soul, right? And once, as we've talked before, I don't care where you're at in the world, I think human beings understand whether they're under a level of suppression or not. And so for this breathing and other meditation aspects here with the groups, it provides a definite threat, because the potential to flow information and, as you said, advance the flow of the group overall. It says here in the article that there's between 70 to 100 million followers of this, but in 1999 is when the persecution started to become pretty predominant. And that in terms of that portion, it said that in another article, Davis Mattis, a human rights lawyer and also a Nobel Prize nominee, said Falun Gong adherents have been the target of protracted cold genocide. It's harder to identify than the mass killings in a shorter period of time from other types of genocide. And he talks about the organ harvesting and other aspects of Falun Gong and other ethnic, racial, religious groups within China. So for us here in America and us in the free world listening now, I don't think a lot of people truly understand is the depth of potential threat that people face by joining this type of group and expressing themselves just in this peaceful manner. They can be murdered, they can be arrested, they can be imprisoned, and in some cases having their organs forcefully taken from them just for practicing what many of us consider such as free and normal every single day. Dr. Yan, would you like to comment on that at all?
Oh yeah, so as I said, Chinese Communist Party target religious groups, but not only religious groups. Just because religious group is an organization, they could easily infiltrate, and also they could, once they have infiltrated, they may suddenly get a lot of people from the groups they can arrest or they can persecute. So in this case, like we all know, if you, for example, in China, if you join any like church and Moscow and whatever groups, don't talk much. If you talk much, like you think, oh, this priest is my friend and I should let him know I'm not satisfied with current certain policy, the government should change it. Okay, people around you, 95% chance, they will, once you start to talk about it, share it with others, there would be CCP's informant around you report, and then you will be a target. They will, it's up to the situation. Sometimes they immediately arrest you. Sometimes they see who is behind you and try to get more people. And also, why we are talking about Chinese Communist Party, try to, one hand, they eliminate these groups, and another hand, they cultivate certain religious group for their use. Because the fundamental things, from my perspective, we need spiritual support we seek it from the religion, from all this goodwill. It's because we are thinking about the meaning of human life and death. And especially recently, I have attended one friend's Catholic funeral. I learned more about death and life. But once you know so much, you think about so much, that means you have your own individual thinking, you respect life. This is the fundamental thing threatens CCP's ruling. You start to respect human life, then this is unstable for CCP, because you see, we have big flood. During the flood recently, just in this week, to protect Beijing, they released the flood to the countryside nearby, and thousands of people now has gone. We don't even have a number. More than 1,000 could be, because in one village there were 5,000 people, and there are so many villages, they are not informed by government the flood will come. So the thing is, once you start to respect human lives, you cannot conduct this kind of policy as a staff member in the government. You cannot keep silence as a journalist. You can, I mean, everything CCP want to do will get obstacle. So from the root, they need to remove this kind of respect to human life, which is what the good religion tell us to respect.
Well, so you make a very good point here in terms of removing the respect for human life. So as Falun Gong talks about truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, you could take a look at any of the religions in the world and they have those aspects of it, because it comes back to the human soul, as you said, and believing in human life and the sanctity of human life. And so what's interesting here is that as that light comes on into the individuals in communist society, they no doubt have sort of an awakening. And you know, many people here in America, when they have an awakening to God, they say they're rebirth, you know, and they're new Christians and such like that. But that awakening to understand the difference in the perspective provides a 180 difference from what the Communist Party wants you to do. Because if you respect human life, as you said, then everything they're doing comes into question, because the communist regimes has no regard for human life. As you pointed out with the floods in China, the COVID lockdowns, you know, there was no sanctity of life. Humans are expendable. But for our audience here, as Dr. Yan and I talk about this, is not only the unrestricted warfare that China is conducting against us and other parts of the world, but as I've also talked about, there's the domestic cognitive war. And then the domestic carnivore is the radical left liberals who are also conducting this type of warfare to make people disregard the sanctity of human life and the values we have in society. And this is why they push issues such as transgenderism. It's not, transgenderism isn't a fight for individual rights, as it was with the gay movement, as I talked on previous programs. Transgenderism is being used to then subjugate and shut down people from having a different type of belief, much as the Chinese take and push different things, and the government is the God. So this is an interesting parallel, but the sanctity of life is also very key here. What you see with democratic policies and how they push these forward, like Obamacare and the death panels, everything comes back to taking away the sanctity of human life, looking at you and other people as necessary collateral damage to maintain the state, maintain the superiority of the state. No difference from the Chinese Communist Party in that regard.